If this goes on, don't panic. Bringing hope to the world through speculative fiction.
Hello and welcome to If This Goes On, Don't Panic. In this episode, we have author and professor Ricardo Victoria. Diane, how are things going?
Pretty good. Moving along. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Had some recent exciting personal news, and I'm also laughing because my personal news majorly affects what just happened in the podcast.
Yeah, he forgot to hit record, so we're starting over.
Yeah, so we've had this conversation already a little bit once.
A little bit.
and my personal news is that I am officially diagnosed ADHD.
And I was like, that tracks. But, actually it's interesting, Alan, because I'm also in the process of looking to get a diagnosis for ADHD. I'm filling out the paperwork that they do for onboarding here in the BC health system to look into that. There's stuff you download and you fill it out and your loved ones fill out other papers because one of the symptoms of ADHD is you're not very good at self-assessment. So,
yeah.
Right. And then they take it in and see if they should do further diagnosis and testing from there. But it's like the start. But I started doing that because I started watching that channel on YouTube, How to ADHD.
Yeah.
And I started incorporating some of the stuff that she suggests as life hacks, right? Like I watched her ADHD friendly home episode. And when I moved into my new house, I arranged things like that with, point of function arrangement. And I have no drawers anymore, right? I don't own a drawer. I have shelves. And if it's not in a shelf, it's in a basket. So I can see it. Because object permanence is a thing. And if I see it, I remember I have it, right? So it's changed my whole life. I don't spend an hour looking for things whenever I want to start a new project now. It's amazing. So I went, I guess I better get a diagnosis. Congratulations on yours. I hope it's going to help you find coping mechanisms.
Well, I will say this. Even just getting it and not doing anything is a huge relief because it's like, this is why I'm like this. Now I understand. It's not,
right.
I'm already so much less frustrated with myself because I understand why I am doing what I am doing, And the object permanence thing is like the big thing for me. I don't get a lot of the other ADHD stuff, but the object permanence thing is like the main one for me, right?
Right.
And I just get so frustrated with myself. Like, why can't I just keep track of this stupid little thing? Everyone else can do it. Why can't I do it? You know what I mean? And I would just get so mad. Now I could just be like, okay, I'm ADHD. I just lose stuff. It's just the way life is. I just have to deal with it,
Yes.
And this is before I've started any treatment, really,
Yeah, I get that completely. And I understand, right? Like my Twitch viewers bug me about my tab army, right? Because I have 1,000 tabs open at the same time when I'm streaming. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm working on all of these things. And if I don't leave the tab up, I'll forget that I was working on it.
It's gone forever.
And then I'll come back 6 months later and go, oh yeah, maybe I should finish that. And it might be important. So yes.
Yes. And let me tell you, putting it on your history, or not your history, but saving it as a favorite doesn't matter because you constantly forget that you even have favorites. So it might as well just be gone.
Yes. It doesn't help at all. Nope. Complete waste of time. Yes.
Yep.
All right.
100%.
Oh, yeah, I can tell we're going to get some good jokes out of this, you and I. All right.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Oh, God.
Awesome. Well, we have a guest today who also is a gentleman of who like ADHD people. I don't know if he has ADHD, but he does that, right? He does multiple things at once.
Yeah. He's doing all kinds of stuff. Kind of incredible how busy he is. I'm always amazed at our guests and how many projects they have going on. I gotta say, most productive people of all time, writers.
Facts right there.
All right, so let's get him on. We'll be right back with Ricardo Victoria. Okay, we're back, and we have Ricardo Victoria. He is a Mexican writer of science fiction, fantasy, horror, and a mix of all of them. He's the author of the hopepunk science fantasy series Tempest Blades, of which Book 3 will be released on June 13th of this year by Shadow Dragon Press, an imprint of Artemisia Publishing. He is one of the co-founders of Inklings Press, a small publisher of thematic anthologies, and has written episodes for the Wicked Library podcast and been nominated to the Sideways Award and 2 New Mexico, Arizona Book Awards. Victoria has written and published over a dozen short stories. He also holds a PhD in design with an emphasis on sustainability from Loughborough University, and a love of fiction, board games, comic books, and action figures, especially Ninja Turtles. He lives in Toluca, Mexico with his wife and pet dogs and works as a full-time lecturer and researcher at the local university. He is also a proud member of SIFWA. Welcome, Ricardo.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We really enjoyed having you on when you did the live episodes with us. So, or episode, I don't know. We're debating. I thought it was 2, but the guys remember 1. So the viewers are going to give us crap for not knowing whichever one of us is wrong. But that's okay. But it's good to have you back. And Ricardo and I are kind of online buddies. We haven't really touched base in a long time, several months. So I'm really looking forward to getting caught up with what's going on.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy. I'm glad to know that you are doing fine, Diane. It has been quite a while since we talked.
Yeah, it has been. Yeah.
Thank you and Alan, for having me in the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
listening for the past months.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah. Thanks. Hey, we'll take any downloads that we can get.
Yeah, we will. We'll be honest.
So let's talk about your fiction. Let's talk about your writing. First, let's start with your origin story. Like, how did you get writing? What interested you in writing? Where does all that come from for you?
Well, since I remember, I think since elementary school, I like to write stories because when I was a kid, I wanted to create cartoons. I mean, I watch a lot of Saturday morning cartoons, so I wanted to create them. But long story short, I studied other things that put a pause in writing. So when I retook writing after finishing my PhD, it was more like therapy. You were mentioning your diagnosis, so I had to share my own. I have been in therapy for the past 2 years, and apparently what I have is dysthymia, which is basically functional depression. So I can go around doing a lot of stuff in my daily life, but I'm depressed. So writing has been for me like a way of occupational therapy to get things out, to deal with those mental health issues in a safer way. And then around 2015, when I was about to get married, I decided to start writing in a more, I won't say professional because if you write, you are an author. I will say in a more disciplined manner.
Mm-hmm.
That would be more correct definition. In a more disciplined manner to try to get and publish the books, the story. And most of my life I have been trying to write the Tempest Blades series with so many iterations, variations of characters and versions that I just lost count.
Oh, that's interesting.
So before writing a novel, because the thing is I'm writing in my second language. I'm a Spanish native speaker, so English is my second language. I had to get practice, and that's when I really long chat with Leo McBride and Brenda Harris, two friends that are also authors and also co-founders of Inklings Press. We decided to create in Link Express to publish our stories and stories from our friends and acquaintances that rarely get a chance to get their stories published, with two objectives: to learn how the publishing industry works and to hone our skills. In my case, mostly the grammar and syntaxes, because it might look similar, Spanish and English, but it's wildly different. So.
Oh yeah, grammar and syntax, totally.
So, that's something I struggle a little bit, even with years of practice, because it happens. And then from writing those short stories during I think it was the first 4 anthologies, I started writing my first novel, The Wither King, the first novel in the Tempest Blades series. And then the struggle was to find someone to publish it, because I'm honest with myself enough to know that I could try to self-publish, but the quality won't be there because, again, second language issues. So I needed someone to support me, and that's when I met the people from Artemisia Publishing, Geoff Habiger, that say, "Oh, I like your story. It's publishing, obviously, but I think we have something interesting here," and helped me a lot to get the series done. I mean, at first I thought it was going to be one book. Then I said, let's go do 5 books. And then say, no, hell no, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life writing a series.
Yeah.
I don't want to do what certain famous author is doing with his series. So
Gotcha.
I put myself a limit.
I feel you there. I feel you there, definitely. Okay, a bunch of stuff I'd love to talk about in what you said there. First of all, I had the opportunity to do an ARC review for The Withered King. I thought it was amazing. It was, it's very much like immersing yourself in an anime feel kind of universe.
Yes.
But with like, it's not, it's like got a different world building framework, but the feel is very anime because it's a lot of action, a lot of, amazing superpowers. And I think it's awesome. Like, I loved it so much. It was, reading it was like, eating your favorite candy, it was really cool. So, I started reading the second book in the series because I was going to do an ARC review, and then my life blew up and I never finished it. So, chaos, move. I've talked about this on the show before. We don't need to get into it again. Tell us about the third book. Let's start with that. Tell us about where, like, without spoilers, no spoilers, but
wait. Ricardo, you should probably give a little bit of an idea of what the first 2 books are about, and then go into the third one.
Okay, yeah, he's right.
Okay, well, it's a science fantasy series, so to get you an idea, it's this mix of magic and science fiction that was very typical of the Saturday morning cartoons. Think Defenders of the Earth, Ninja Turtles, that mixed magic and science. Or think Final Fantasy, the most recent entries of the so it's that kind of vibe. And there is a lot of anime influences because I watch a lot of anime, and since I got married and my wife is a big fan of anime, I watch even more anime than before. So that's inevitable. The series starts with main character named Fionn. He's a warrior, a retired hero from a world that got unstuck on time or frozen on time, and then found himself thrusting a century into the future of his world.
Yes.
After a really, really tragic event in his past that cost him everything. So he's trying to rebuild his life. He adopts one of his descendants, but he's suffering from PTSD.
Yes. And you portray that pretty well, I'd say, yes.
Oh, thank you. And then events that are happening in the world thrust him back into the fight and into the position that he hates the most, which is teaching. I'm not saying this is based on my experience as a star teacher, but this is basically my experience as a teacher.
Okay, we know the secret now. This is Ricardo's venting book. That's what it is. Yeah. No, I'm teasing.
But I took some inspiration from the first years when I became a teacher, when they just push you into the pool without you knowing how to swim. So going back to the book, so Fionn is in this position of having to train two new, I will say, gifted people in this setting are people that were close to die and then survived and somehow got superpowers, to make the story short. And then he has to train them so they can survive what's coming from them. I'm trying to keep this spoiler free. And
I'll throw this in. He ends up with this amazing, interesting cast of characters who are all a little bit dysfunctional in their own way, but endearing because of it.
Yeah.
And their dynamic is actually a driving force of the story, which I thought was pretty great.
Thank you, Diane. Thanks. So it's a fantasy series. There are different species living in the same planet. We have humans. There are regular humans. We have free folk that are similar to humans out in the outside, but they have some difference, and they can channel magic. And then you have Samaros that are like lizard turtle people that have really advanced technology, but they don't like to share it with anyone except from one of the characters in the main cast that decided to help with that. I'm going to share my technology because I want to explore the space and build a spaceship. And that's how the characters move around. And so, yeah, as Diane said, I focus the story more than in the world building, in the dynamic of the characters.
Yeah, it's a very character-driven story, I find.
Yes,
they get themselves into trouble as much as circumstance gets them into trouble, which is great.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes some of them open their mouth way too soon, and then bad luck strikes. Well, since there is a second book, you can assume that they succeeded in the first book.
They lived anyway. At least most of them did. We can assume. Yeah.
Learn how to be a teacher, and along with him is the other two students. It's Alex and Gabby. Gabby is a singer. Alex is a student, and Fionn's daughter, which is Sam, who is the main spellcaster in the group. There is Sid as Amaro, who is the builder of the ship, and Harlan, who is a friend of Fionn, and is basically the one sponsoring the adventures. And in the second book, the main topic is the fallout of the first one. You can save the world without causing political unrest, because someone has to be blamed for. So there is a political crisis that arrives in calling their version of the Olympics, which is basically each country chooses their three or species choose their three best fighters and put them to fight, not to the death, because that's forbidden, but they have to fight in the special terrains, and they take decisions based on who wins the fight. But while that's happening, Alex, one of the characters from the previous book, is going through a serious depression, bordering in suicide. It's a book, a heavy book in that regard, because this is the one that I talk more about my own issues with depression. And while those things are happening, there is an enemy that is planning to release the Corpse Titans, hence the title of the book, which are basically former mortals turned into natural phenomena that can level the whole planet, and they have to stop them while at the same time trying to avoid a war, while at the same time trying to help Alex with his depression and keep him from suicide by heroism. So basically, save the world by killing yourself. And the third book, which is going to be released in June, also pick up some of the events. Between each book, there is like 1 to 2 years gap, so it's not right away. The story doesn't happen right away. Things happen between books. And now the main focus on the third book is in Gabby and Sam that are dealing with personal issues. Sam, for things that happened in the previous book, doesn't feel free folk anymore. Is confused about her identity, which is a little bit inspiring. What happens when you move countries, for example, that you have a nationality, but you have to adapt to a new nationality and to new customs. So it's a little bit of cultural identity. And on the other hand, Gabby is having also an identity crisis in terms of she wants to be a singer, she wants to tour the world, she wants to compose music, but she's also a superhero in terms of the world. So she has this duty because she is one of the few people that can do what she can do, but also she wants to live her life. So it's and just got married and is trying to balance. But the stories are running parallel, and it's much about balancing things in your life and learning to choose what you want to be and finding out that what you choose is fine as long as it makes you happy, as long as you don't hurt anyone. What you choose is fine because it's your choice, which is something that we really don't learn to do until we're really old in real life, because many of our life choices are not our choices. We take them because we feel pressure.
Yes.
To do so. So what I'm talking in the book is that no, you don't have to choose A or B. You can choose a middle ground or find a third option or discover that you are fine with doing different things at the same time. You don't have to study, for example, a degree in literature to be a writer. You can do something else and also be a writer. That kind of things. That's kind of also, I will say, inspired about a personal event of many, many, many years ago when I changed majors. I had to make a really tough life decision because choosing your major here in Mexico is really, really important. Choosing your major in university basically determines a lot of your life for the rest of your life. So changing majors is a big issue. And I did that, so I kind of explores a little bit of that, learning to live with your choices and accepting them and find what makes you happy.
It's a beautiful message.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, at least here in the United States, I can't speak for Canada or Mexico necessarily, but it's like, if you do want to do something other than your main track, you have like this tremendous pressure to be successful and make money at it. Like,
yes,
I can tell you, I struggle with this with the podcast all the time. It's like, how successful is the podcast if I'm not making money on it? But then I have to remind myself that's not the point of the podcast. The point of the podcast is all these other things, not making money. But then my self-doubt creeps in. But how successful are you if you're not? And then I'm like, it's just a constant fight. And that's how it is with a lot of things, at least in this country.
Yeah, we're influenced by that too. I like that whole idea that our worth depends upon our material success. I think there are other things that we should be judging worth on,
Yeah.
But the whole society teaches us otherwise, and it's really difficult to go against the grain that way. And if you do choose to go against the grain that way, right, like, it makes it difficult to continue to maintain, because there is a reality that we live in a capitalist society and we have to pay the rent or the mortgage. And the only way to do that is by making money. So how much time can we justify spending on the things that give us joy if they're not making us money? And it's, it's complex, right? Like I constantly say I'm a working class writer, and I do that because, I don't know, there's pressure the other way too. There's pressure to, well, you shouldn't be writing for the cash. And I'm like, dude, I don't write for the cash, but I'm going to try to get it because otherwise I have to spend time I'm doing writing, doing something else. And I don't want to.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah. I feel you.
Yeah. Here, there is a lot of pressure to study even very specific degrees. Most people study law or medicine or engineering. Those are the main three. They sell you the idea that they are the ones that make more money. The thing is, those degrees are oversaturated. There are more people studying them than jobs. So back then I took a big risk when I changed chemical engineering for industrial design because I spend most of my time drawing and I don't get along with math.
Yeah.
I can't do anything above divisions. That's where my math knowledge ends. I can understand perfectly the concepts. I can read physics books and understand it perfectly, but the math just eludes me. Entonces, so I traded for industrial design because being a writer in Mexico is just starving. That's the reality. There is no publishing industry here.
Right.
Like it's in the US or in Canada. So I took a middle ground, find a degree that I could find a way to live off, which in this case I'm teaching because I got a PhD and a scholarship and I had to pay the scholarship by teaching. So I just stay there. And I found that I can have my main job, which is good. I like it, but it's not my whole life. It's just a means to an end. So I can do things I actually like traveling with my wife, like writing, like designing board games, trying to find a middle ground between what you have to do as a responsible adult, according to society, and what you want to do to keep your mental health intact. Which is, as I say, is a topic I touch in the 3 books, the mental health thing, because it's a really important thing for me. And I think it's something fiction needs to touch better, in a better, more educate, more respectful way, because usually when you have a character in fiction that has a mental health issue, is a villain. Oh, he's crazy. That's why he's trying to destroy the world. And
yes.
Yeah.
That's not what happens in real world. I mean, there are cases, but it's not what happens in the real world. Mental health is so stigmatized because of that.
Yeah, it's true. People who suffer from mental health issues are far more likely to be victimized than to be a victimizer. It's true.
So that's something I wanted to hopefully change with my books. I mean, I know it's a long shot, but I want to change that someone with mental health issues, like one of my characters that has to go to therapy and take medicines, and I mean, his therapist with him during one of the fights trying to coach him that, okay, keep focused, don't go there, do that, to help him. I want to touch that to show that just because you have a mental health issue, it doesn't make you the bad person. It doesn't set you for failure. You just need to identify what kind of help do you need to get better, because it's like having a cold, having diabetes, having any other chronic physical issue that illness that can be attended because we have the resources, we have the knowledge now. It's not like at the beginning of the previous century when.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So that's something important.
It's an approach I try to take in my work too, actually. So I'm behind you there. Yeah.
So I want to ask you a question about that, because this is something that I have written down in my notes here. And especially in your second book, you talk about this a lot. This is like a major plot point, which I believe you've already mentioned that. How can writers do a better job of portraying people with mental illnesses like depression or, I don't know, something else?
First, they need to remember that people is people, not archetypes, not stereotypes, not an excuse to get your villain or your character or your hero to do things. You know what I mean? It's like
I do. Yep.
Mental health is not the excuse to do things. It's something you have to live with, because sometimes it's just for example, in my case, I didn't want to get depressed. I had depression since high school, but it's because I have a chemical imbalance in my brain. So I have to take meds to keep my and in the past years I have to make changes in my diet to get more serotonin, eating more avocado, so
Right.
my brain can stabilize it, and I don't get these mood swings. So the first thing a writer needs to do to write a character with mental health issues is remember it's a person behind the character. I mean, it's a fictional character. I agree, but there are people that have as the same condition. So remember, you need empathy. You need to remember that there are people with this condition that have feelings, that have needs, that have desires, dreams, nightmares, problems, and they're like you. They are just dealing with a condition that can be treated. Sometimes they don't have the means to treat it. Sometimes they ignore they have the problem and they need counseling. There are people, so don't treat them as stereotypes or cartoon versions of a real person. Second, study about the topic. As writer, you need to study a lot of stuff. That's the reality. You don't read, you are going to be in really big troubles if you want to write. But in this case, you need to inform yourself, especially if you don't live with the condition. You need to talk with people that have the condition, talk to therapists, to inform yourself better so you can portray it in a respectful manner. Which I think is the most important thing. Don't stigmatize, rather the portrayal has to be in a respectful manner. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, because mental illness is very stigmatized, and I think the more conversations people hear about this kind of thing, and the more they hear people, especially writers who have a certain kind of mental illness, talk about writing that mental illness, the more we can, propagate that information and kind of, just help other people understand what it's like, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point. Thank you for reminding me of that. We need to have open talks about mental health instead of the classic hush hush. Don't mention it because that is going to cause problems with their family. No, we need to have an open, honest, informed conversation about this, so it gets normalized, and then people can get the treatment they need. Because they find out it's not, as I say, it's not different like living with diabetes. A lot of people live with diabetes and they just got their insulin shots and their special diets, and they can live fulfilling lives. It's not different to living with glasses.
I love that, actually, Ricardo. I've made that comparison. Yeah, I've made that comparison many times, actually, right? I've said diabetes in particular, right? Mental health, 90% of mental health illnesses are a chemical imbalance, or if they're caused by something else, they create a chemical imbalance. And, people with diabetes have a chemical imbalance. They take their medication and they're fine, right? If there's complications, right? But mostly they're fine. Mental health is like that. You take your meds, you do your therapy, you adjust your diet, whatever it is, and you're fine. There's no need for this ridiculous stigma. It's just like any other health issue, in my opinion. So yeah, I love that you likened it to that. That's cool.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's why I think things like the mental health month is a really important thing, because it takes the discussion to the public so they can get informed.
Yes.
But informed in function of science, of studies, not just some people take advantage of that to con others. So the information has to be sustained by data, by the science. I guess that's the researcher in me talking about this, that you cannot go and claim something. You need to do your research, and as a writer, you have to do your research.
Yeah, and not only does that make you look like a better writer, but it makes your books more interesting, because you come in with these stereotypes, and they're flat. You know what I mean? They're not
Yes.
3-dimensional characters, whereas, somebody with depression or ADHD or whatever else, or anxiety or any of these things, they're 3-dimensional people. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
so, man, two other things I want to talk about. Let's talk about hopepunk a little bit, because I know you and I discuss this a lot offline or online, but just not on the podcast, is what I mean. And you're a big proponent of hopepunk. Why do you think it's important to write hopeful fiction, and why are you yourself trying to write hopepunk?
Okay, why I think it's important, I'm just going to answer. Have you seen the state of the world currently? That's why it's important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to refer to The Last of Us. I'm not going to spoil episode 3, but people need to watch that episode, because the lesson of that episode, or at least the one I got, I mean, it's beautiful written, greatly acted. It's that episode of a man where need to win as many awards as possible. But the main lesson I got from that episode, and I think is the main lesson of hopepunk, is it's not enough with surviving. You need to live. You need to learn to live. And right now, as the whole planet, we are just surviving. We are just getting by, because we wake up, we go to work, barely eat, then go back to home, then sleep, and we spend 40, 50 years of our life like that. That's not living.
Yeah.
So, and you turn on the news or go to Twitter, which is honestly a hellhole in many aspects, and you just see the world is collapsing all around us. So you need to. The reason why hopepunk is important is because we need something to remind us that we have to fight back. We need to do something. It doesn't mean you have to do something Superman level. I mean, sometimes just smiling to the cashier at your local shop can do a lot of difference for that person. A thank you. Be nice to, well, not nice, be kind to others. You can be cranky and angry, but also be nice. Kind to others. And kindness is something we need a lot more. So those small changes can have a lot of impact around us. And that's why I think we need more hopeful literature, because we have gotten into this routine that, since the real life or the real world is pretty grim right now, because that's the reality, our fiction has to be that way. So it stops being fiction and becomes like projection, I guess. I mean, nothing against the people that write grimdark. I respect them a lot. Writing grimdark without getting depressed takes a lot of mental fortitude, so I respect them. In my case, it's not just for me. I tried to write grimdark. The original version of Tempest Blades was going to be a little bit darker and grimmer than this now, and I couldn't. For my mental health, I just couldn't. I say that if I'm going to this through these dark times in my real life, I cannot do this in my fictional life, so to speak.
Yeah,
I
right.
need to keep something that cheers me up, that keeps me going, that reminds me why it's worth fighting for things. It's kind of there is this really old Simpsons episode, I think one from the first 5 seasons, when Homer got his dream job in the bowling alley and then had to return to the nuclear plant because Maggie was born. And Mr. Barnes is being evil with him. There's no other way to say it. And Homer keeps going because in front of his station, he has all the photos from Maggie with a sign saying that, do it for her. You are doing this for her. And I think that's a powerful message, because when you start doing things, not just for you, but for others, you realize that you can do a lot for yourself. So that's it. I think that's the thing of hop punk. It's not that reality is. It's not. Hop punk doesn't say that. Oh, the story has to be happy, joy, joy every time, and everything is perfect, and everything. No, things can go from bad to worse. You can get in serious troubles, but you need to keep fighting back, and you need to keep doing things and moving on, and learn to ask for help, and learn to offer help, because sometimes that's harder than ask for help. And so we can move from the dark times, or leave the dark tunnel behind, and can find something that makes us go from surviving to living, and then have to enjoy even the little things in life. So I think hop punk is that kind of message. Okay, things are bad, but they can get better. To get better, we have to do this. We have to work as community. We have to support each other. We cannot let things just go in the same way, because that's the status quo. The status quo needs to be shaken up. Just look at the human history. How many times the status quo has been changed? We can do it again. But since media right now is so focused on grimdark and sad stories and people backstabbing others, and we have lost sight of that. So we need to recover that hopeful vision, not to delude us and say, oh, everything is going to be perfect, but rather to say, this is what we have to fight for. This is what we need to do things for, so we can get better, or leave a better world for our kids. Ancient Greeks had this idea that true immortality is not living like the gods. True immortality is when people remembers your name for the good deeds you did. Ancient Greeks thought that everyone is going to the underworld. You are dead. Your life in the afterlife is going to suck. Everyone is going the same way. So true immortality is being remembered for the good deeds you did for other people. And I think it's a good message, not because we want to be immortal, but because we want to leave something better for others than what we got now. I mean, I also remember when Betty White passed away a year, 2 years ago. I was amazed to see all the messages saying from a 99-year-old lady that she died too young. She was a 99-year-old lady, and people say she died too soon, because she was making, on her own way, life better for others. So she was missed for that. So I think that's the kind of messages we need to get from hop punk, that we need to do things for us and for others, not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's what is going to make things better, and it's going to keep us going when things get really, really bad.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, because this brings up an interesting dichotomy in your writing. You not only are you writing these hope punk novels, but you also write a lot of your shorter fiction is horror, right? I actually really enjoy your horror stories quite a bit. What's the difference between horror and grimdark?
That's a good question. I don't know if I'm the right person to answer it. I think grimdark is just, as I say, I'm not an expert on the topic, so any grimdark readers or writers that are listening to this, I sincerely apologize if I make a mistake. Grimdark, I think, is kind of stories like Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have morally great characters that are the ones that are surviving, because the reality of their world doesn't allow for much room for playing nice. And horror is more like an expression of what can make you feel afraid, and make it bigger. I can't pronounce the word, but blow it away.
Mm-hmm.
So I write horror because, for starters, I have to admit this, and I apologize for this, but I grew up reading a lot of H.P. Lovecraft. So I know. Funny side note: the translator of Lovecraft's stories into Spanish deleted a lot of the racist connotations of the stories on purpose.
You say he erased them?
Yeah, he took them out from the text.
Good. I love that.
I mean, the stories read the same, but he changed the more problematic expressions or words, so they didn't feel as problematic as they are in English. It's not an excuse; it's just a side note. So yeah, I grew up reading a lot of Lovecraft, and also it helps that being Catholic, I have heard a lot of stories about exorcisms. So horror is something that has been always in the background. So when I write horror, I don't write it to scare people, because even if I can't, I can't. I just write it to have fun being the villain for once. It's like a role reversal. When I write my novels, I try to keep more, if you like, I'm sorry for the comparison, but more heroic mindset. Okay, heroes can do this, but when I write horror, I get to write the villains or really stupid people that do really stupid selfish things, and they're going to get the common pants. So I get to have that kind of release and fun, so I can go back to write a hopepunk. It's like a balance, It's like unleashing my inner sadistic villain. So yeah, you can do this to these characters, but not to these ones. So in horror, you can do all you want to do with the characters.
Yeah.
These ones, leave them alone.
Okay, so I think you're saying horror for the writer is about vengeance.
No, I actually have found that the horror writing community is one of the nicest communities around within the writing community. Yeah. I mean, there are exceptions, but they're usually really good people, supportive, nice.
Yeah, it's true.
They teach you a lot. They support you a lot. They share ideas. You're really nice people. So I won't characterize it as horror is for vengeance. It's more like it's a release valve. It's like your opportunity to let go of some stuff you have in your mind in a healthier way, and that's all. So what I have seen of the horror writing community, they are really good people and nice people and supportive. So I won't characterize it like that.
Yeah, it's true. I've found that too, that the horror community is really excellent. They're quite happy to, give you a boost, give you a shout out, to, support you if you have questions. They're really, it's a very friendly and welcoming community. And that's absolutely a fact. What I got from that is that, horror is just about the things that scare you. Grimdark, the nice guys really do finish last. And I think you're right. Now, granted, I'm not a Grimdark writer. I am a Grimdark reader, though. I do read a fair bit of Grimdark. I personally am beginning to rebel against Grimdark for Grimdark's sake, though. It is important to know that, sometimes the good guys do finish last, but not always. And I think that there's been a lot of mainstream focus on teaching us that the good guys finish last. And I think that is destructive. And I think that it's harmful, because if our message is constantly, it's like, okay, do you guys, I don't know, are you guys both old enough to remember that all the comedies in the 90s were romantic comedies about how if a guy stalked a girl long enough, she'd give in and marry him?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly what you're talking about.
So you know what that taught men at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
To continue stalking women, and eventually, because that was romantic, right? No, that is not a good way to behave. We need to have messages in media and in literature that show that there are other ways to do things. Okay, yeah, sometimes the good guys do finish last, but it's also true that people remember if you gave them a hand, and they are more likely to give you a hand if you gave them a hand. right? It really is. And they're more likely to give others a hand if you gave them a hand. That's the other thing, right? If somebody reached out and helped you, right? And you remember that, what do they often say, right? Pay it forward, right? So when someone else comes along that is struggling like you did, you remember what that person did for you who reached out to you and helped you, and then you reach out and help them, right? Not all the time, but most of the time, I think, because I think people are basically good. We all have dark sides, but I think that not good people really are the exception. So building an environment where you support each other builds a better world. So building examples of where that works in your writing, or where it at least mitigates some of the bullshit, right? That's a positive thing. That's a real, I don't know. I agree with you, right? I think it can change the world if enough people do it. I've been joking, like I've said it lots. This is the cyberpunk dystopia we warned you about. And I see more and more of it each day. Oh, new things like now there's land speculators buying up the land around the Colorado River because they're anticipating, right? They're anticipating scarcity.
I just read
and
that
they're
yesterday.
like, we're going to sell you water, which you need to live. And isn't this a great investment opportunity? And people are like, I read this novel, okay? I read several of these novels in the 80s and the 90s. I read them. They were all cyberpunk novels. They were shit, or they were apocalypse novels. Come on, man. Right? What are you doing? There's another situation. I forget what state this is in, but there's a proposal on the books that prisoners who donate their organs get time off their sentences.
Yes.
I'm like, are you shitting me?
Massachusetts.
Good God. What are you thinking? Right? And I'm like, okay, so some people took these cyberpunk and dystopian novels and used them as instruction manuals, right? Rather than cautionary tales, which is what they were intended to be. So maybe if that's the way the world works, we need to create instruction manuals that teach people how to build positive communities, right?
Exactly.
And that's why we need hopepunk. That's why we need hopepunk.
Yeah, and I think something that sometimes get lost when talking about hopepunk is that you need the dark to show what's the light. You need the contrast.
Yes. Yes, there's got to be bad guys. There's got to be a dark principle you're trying to defeat. Yes.
Exactly. So hopepunk stories don't lack terrifying villains, don't lack horror, don't lack horror or horrible things. Or I in my novels I inject a little bit of horror descriptions because I need to show that this is how things are going to get if we don't do anything. So you need to have that contrast.
And this is
light
what
and
can
dark.
be done if we do positive things, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And this is something that comes also from the subjects I teach at university, which is sustainability. Now you mentioned the water in Colorado. Yeah, I saw the news and I was like, I'm sad to say that I'm not surprised. I'm surprised that it took them so long.
I know, right?
Because I know of a company, I'm not going to say the name for, but it's a well-known company because there's a documentary that talks about that says that water is not a right. It's a precious resource that has to be marketed. When I heard that from the president, I stopped buying any product from that company. Because I said, this is...
How long have we known each other? We've known each other like several years now. I remember several years ago, you were talking about water speculation becoming a new market, right? You said that. I remember it specifically. And it's because of your work and your studies on sustainability that you brought that forward. I remember this conversation.
Yeah, because that's where we are going. I mean, I see it in my country.
Yeah, and here we are.
We have a lot of water bottling plants that are taking out the water from the communities. I have one a few blocks from my house, and that's causing a lot of problem for people to get just water for them. Forget about cooking and watering plants just for them. So this is something that has been growing for years, and as I say, I'm surprised it took so long to do that to the Colorado River. And it's something that is going to impact my country as well, because a lot of the rivers in the US connect with rivers in Mexico. So sometimes the people, I get that, why you are so interested in US politics and economics if you live in Mexico? Well, because we are neighboring countries. What happens in one country affects the other. That's no other way around. We are so interconnected, both countries, and with Canada, although not that much with Canada because we have US in the middle, that anything that, but something happens in Canada.
Yeah, we're all interconnected. Like we all live on the same landmass here, just because we've inadvertently drawn these artificial borders.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're all interconnected. We all affect each other. We certainly do.
This is a great segue into your nonfiction book, Ricardo. Let's talk about your nonfiction book about sustainability, because it also deals with science fiction. So why don't you give us some background on that?
Well, it's a project. It's not finished yet. I will say it's around 80% done. It's co-authored with a friend of mine from high school.
Mm-hmm.
That she reads way more science fiction and fantasy books than me. So she's the one fact-checking some of the literary aspects. And the idea I got is because when I teach my classes at university, I tend to use a lot of examples from movies and TV and podcasts to explain some concepts to my students, because if I go and just write down in the whiteboard the concept, they usually get lost, because some concepts, even as simple as they might be, are not that easy to see in your daily life.
Right.
So I got this bad habit of using a lot of those examples from science fiction, fantasy, and other sources. And I thought, well,
I call that being a good teacher personally, but go ahead.
Thanks. And I thought that I got the idea that, maybe I could write a book about teaching the most basic concepts of sustainability to people that are into science fiction and fantasy, but don't want a technical book, because there's a lot of books about sustainability.
Yes.
But not many people read them because some of them can be quite technical.
Mm-hmm.
So I say, well, I'm going to do this using examples. For example, I'm going to talk about social justice and mention some examples of Terry Pratchett's This World. Or when I talk about consumerism, I use the example of, if you are creating a D&D character, in this case, do you really need that fancy armor, or you can get a more effective armor for less gold pieces?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Perfect.
And also I found out that there is an interesting parallel between the history of science fiction and the history of sustainability. There are parallels. For example, when Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings, it was roughly around the same time where the first environmentalist movements began.
Brilliant.
So those movements used the Lord of the Rings, particularly the Scourge of the Shire part, the last part of the book, as example of what was going on with the world. And I read somewhere, I couldn't find the source, but I read somewhere that because of Lord of the Rings, lots of the kids or people that participated on those environmentalist movements had names like Aragorn, or Frodo, or Merry. So sustainability, it comes in three waves, more or less 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, beginning of the new century, which really parallels some of the movements in science fiction and fantasy in terms of storytelling. So the 80s coincide with Mad Max, for example.
Do you think that the prevalence of it in the science fiction of the time kind of helps drive the movement? Or do you think that science fiction and fantasy writers write about sort of the zeitgeist of their time? Or do you think the answer is yes?
The answer is yes. I think
Awesome.
both elements feed on each other because let's remember that many of science fiction and fantasy writers have a scientific background. Not everyone, of course, but many have. I mean,
Or
think on
amateur
Arthur
interest
Clarke.
that's really strong. Sure.
Yeah, or work as a science, like Carl Sagan that made shows to talk about science.
You have a background in this, right? Like, I don't think we ever said, but your degree is in sustainability, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, my PhD is in my PhD is in design, but I focused on sustainability.
Awesome.
So basically, sustainable design. And as I said before, I did 3 semesters, year and a half of chemical engineering before studying industrial design. So, and my parents are chemical engineer and pharmacobiologist, chemical. So, I grew up with science all my life. So, I have an interest in science, mostly astrophysics. Don't know why. Don't ask me why.
Sure.
I blame Cosmos for that.
Me too.
so, so yeah, I got very interesting. And what I saw when I was writing the first draft of this book was authors and environment movement feed each other because what is happening with the environment, with the planet, is a concern that anyone with a little bit of imagination can kind of think or project or plan what is going to happen in a few years. I'm in the book. I mentioned we refer to the annual migration of clouds by Primi Mohammed.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about water scarcity. And when I was reading it, she poses that water scarcity is going to cause a collapse in the supply chain. And we saw that with the pandemic already. So it's not that far fetched. So I think it's like a symbiosis. They feed of each other. Fantasy. Sometimes people say, "Oh, fantasy authors just write a fantasy world where nothing that happens are related to a real world." But as Terry Pratchett proved, you can write fantasy that touches on social issues and environmental issues and political and economic issues that we are living right now. And he called like this like righteous anger. He said in his biography, which I'm reading, the biography that wrote by his former assistant, that he used to write a little bit angry because he was angry at what was going with the world, and writing was a good way to to talk about the topic and maybe create some awareness in the readers. So also, I blame my interest in social issues to Terry Pratchett.
Yes.
I think a lot of people
Yes.
can, which is a good thing in my opinion.
Yeah, I really recommend his books because it makes you realize a lot of things you don't notice, even in the way you speak.
Yeah.
There are, for example, in Mexican Spanish, there is some colloquialism, some idioms that when you go to the bottom of them are really ableist and racist, but you don't notice because you grow up with them.
Mm-hmm.
And after I read his books, I realized that no, this word is wrong. So I need to cut them out from my vocabulary right away because I don't know if I'm hurting someone else, but I don't want to hurt someone else because of my ignorance.
A good attitude to have in general, yeah.
Yeah. As a science fiction writer and fan, and also someone who has a PhD in sustainability design, what do you think about solar punk?
I like solar punk in general. I think the subgenre need more to be more widespread. I mean, not many people know about solar punk. I know there is a contest. I know there are some publications, but it hasn't get into the zeitgeist of the conversation because sadly anything related to renewable energies can get really political, and some people don't know how to have a civilized discussion about the topic.
Right.
They take it personal and they say, okay, listen, it's not personal against you. It's this is something we have to do, because otherwise we're going to kill each other with our cars, for example, or with other kind of fossil fuel sources of energy, for example. So Solarpunk is proposing a future where we found a way, or we are finding a way, to solve our energy needs in a more environmental friendly way, which I like. But right now, I think it's struggling with that barrier, which is it's a shame, because I mean, fiction by nature is political. Anyone that says that, oh, keep my science fiction free of politics is deluded, because
Yes,
science fiction and fantasy has been always political. The
always.
thing is, we don't know how to have a civilized conversation about it.
Yeah.
And by civilized, I mean listening both points and try to reach an agreement on how to balance the needs of society with the needs of the environment, so we can coexist in balance. And that takes a lot of empathy and maturity that right now not many people have.
Yes.
And sadly, the people that don't have it are the people in charge of making the decisions.
Yep. We're about out of time here. Let's get to our last few questions. The question that we ask everybody, Ricardo, is what is bringing you hope right now?
Right now, well, last time in the live interview, I talked about a more personal family level, about my family and my wife. This time, I would like to go with something I have noticed, which gives me a little bit more hope, which is younger generations. I'm not going to go, oh, boomers, millennials, and so on. Younger generations fight back.
Yes.
The status quo is this one, and they say, no, why it has to be that way? You are wrong, because this is causing these problems. You are destroying the planet. You are hurting people. So we are going to fight back to change the status quo. And I say this like Greta Thunberg.
Yes.
I wish there were more kids like her.
Yes.
Because this generation fights back, and that gives me hope, because at the same time, it's teaching older generations to fight back too.
I agree. I think a lot of us, I once got into a conversation about generational stuff on Twitter, and someone was like, yeah, you boomers and Xers, y'all failed us. I said, dude, the Xers were fighting the same fight. We just lost. We were outnumbered, but you're here now and you're leading the way, and you've got a lot of great solutions, and I'll follow you, I'll follow you if you guys want to lead. I'll march in that army, because I'm just seeing so many good things. And they've got innovative solutions. They're not willing to tolerate the same kind of crap that maybe we were willing to tolerate. Yes, I agree with you. I think that they're giving me hope too.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying this is not an issue of generations, because that's an issue, the easiest way to blame someone. Oh yeah, boomers did this, or Gen X did that.
Definitely.
But to be honest, there were also boomers that paved the way for newer generations to do that. I mean, for example, maybe this is not the best example, but I remember the commentary by Al Gore about.
Al Gore was right.
Yeah,
everybody mocked him at the time, but he was right about everything he said.
The Inconvenient Truth, that documentary. He's a boomer. He was before the internet, and formative work paved the way to raise awareness into the following generations. So saying that, oh, previous generations did this wrong, I will say groups of people did things wrong, but also groups of people did things right, because someone had to pave the way for this. So what gives me hope is that younger generations are reminding older generations how to fight back and try to make things right.
Awesome.
So it hasn't become a thing of generations. It's more a thing of, I will say, social. Sometimes it's social classes. Sometimes it's a thing of people that like to live in certain intellectual bubble where they avoid anything that confronts the reality.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones that are trying to stop things from changing, are trying to maintain the status quo. But there is a lot of good people that are either fighting for the first time or rediscovering the fire to fight. And we are seeing that kind of social movements. I mean, this is a silly example, but take, for example, what happened with Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro and the changes they wanted to do for access to the open game license. You have a company that wanted to keep a product that actually has been propped up and maintained by the community, wanted to make it Wallet Garden. And the community say, fine, we are going to do our stuff much better than yours, and you are going to lose your clients because we are your clients. So this kind of social pressure made the company change their plans.
And lickety split too. Yep, they changed their song in a big hurry. Yes, a very good example. I agree with you.
I mean, D&D is a microscopic example of a product compared to other wider issues in the planet. But what caught my interest is the kind of social mobilization that made a company stop and change things. That rarely happens.
Yes.
So if we could take that example and make it widespread to every single company in the planet and make people aware that they are the ones that have the power, but through choosing what they consume, how they consume, and from whom, then companies lost all their power. And that's the kind of fight back we are seeing. That's the kind of fight back that is giving me hope.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's great. Next question. What is coming out for you next?
Right now, I'm in the finishing stages of copy editing and tiny details for the third Tempest Blades book novel, The Magic of Chaos, that, as you say, is going to be released in June 13. And I'm starting to write the final book of the series because I really need to take a break from writing book series. So I want to get it done. And our English press is back. So we are planning and we put a submission call for detective stories, but with science fiction or fantasy settings, with that kind of twist. So not your traditional detective noir story, but you have wizards investigating a crime scene. You have cyborgs trying to catch a serial killer. That kind of twist. So the call is open until April 30.
Okay.
I already have my story, which is going to be, because I'm a little bit of egomaniac promoter, so I'm submitting a story about a detective story with one of the main characters of my novels. Nice. It's a prequel to my novels.
Cool. I'll send you guys something. I've got this, a couple of characters that I wrote about in a story that I sold to Cosmas Infinities. And they're like near future solar punk cops in Vancouver. So I've been wanting to write more about them. This will give me an excuse. Cool.
Oh, cool. Please send it. Another way. We want to show that you can write a detective story in any fictional genre possible, because the important thing is the characters and the plot.
Absolutely.
So and there is the science fiction and sustainability book. I have another book, but that one is in Spanish that I wrote for my students that hopefully will get published this year. And trying to convince my publisher to publish a story collection. Put all my stories together finally in one single book.
I would buy that.
Yes.
Jeff, if you're listening, I would buy that. I know Jeff too, actually. He's a good guy, done some stuff in our Writers Conduit online conference event, and he's just a good all-around dude. Yes, I would buy that. So there you go.
Yes, yep. I love your short fiction, actually.
Those are... Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. That really motivates me to keep writing more short fiction.
I love it.
Awesome.
So those are the plans.
Great. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Where can we find you on the web?
I have my website and I really need to update, which is ricardovictoriau.com, or the alternative address is scifantastic.com. And also I spend a lot of time in Twitter. My handle is how do you pronounce winged _Leo.
Yep.
And also I'm moving to Mastodon because I don't know when Twitter is going to implode.
That's where we're all
I'm
at.
just watching the train wreck with my popcorn on the side because that thing is going to implode sooner or later.
I resurrected my Tumblr account as my backup, but there you go.
Yeah.
I created a Mastodon account, which is in Writing Exchange. Same handle, Winged Leo, Writing Exchange. And I also have a Tumblr account with the same handle. I try to keep the same handle for most of my socials.
Makes sense.
Yes.
So it's easier to find. And yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me.
Okay. Great.
Awesome.
I mean, I'm always willing to talk with people about my books or just random stuff in Twitter. So yeah, please send me a tweet. It's okay.
Great. So thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. It was so good to have an opportunity to catch up with you.
Thank you for having me again. I really enjoyed your podcast.
Okay, and that was our conversation with Ricardo Victoria. Before we continue on, I just want to remind you all to share our stuff on Facebook, Twitter, Mastodon, whatever it is that you use for social media these days.
Your resurrected Tumblr account, whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah, whatever. No, not judging. And always go and rate or review us wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. That would help us as well. If you're wondering how else you can support us, we also have a patreon.com. So you can check us out, patreon.com/ifthisgoeson. We'd appreciate any help that you're willing to contribute. We just did another Patreon vote, and we will be having Maurice Brodus on sometime soon. That is who they chose. We also have discounts to Kat Rambo's School of Writing. I do some 5-minute book reviews on there, although to be honest, it's been a while. I need to get back onto that. Old episodes that haven't aired anywhere else. Well, anyway, you get the idea. Go and check it out. You can contribute up to, I think the lowest is $1 a month at this point. I just recently changed it, so I might be slightly off on the details there. We also have a coffee account. That's Ko-fi. If donating every month is not in the cards for you, you can go and check that out. Just search If This Goes On. We'll pop right up there. I have done it. It is pretty easy to do, and we would appreciate your help there. Okay, I think that's enough with the with all the
begging for money and attention.
Yeah.
It always feels like that to me. It's necessary. It's important. That's the only way we get the word out, right? But I always feel a little awkward. Support the podcast however you can, guys, if you like what we do, right? This is unfortunately a capitalist society. We cannot survive without your support. So if you want to see more of us, you know how to make sure to make that happen.
Yes. What Diane said, exactly. So Diane, what do you think about the conversation?
Oh, I've really enjoyed it. I love talking to Ricardo. I haven't done it in a long time. I've really been meaning to catch up with him. And he's just such an interesting person. He's got, he's a guy who thinks really deeply. And then you get him talking about the things that he thinks about. And it just leads to, I find, like a web of conversation that you can pursue. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely going to get his book on sustainability and science fiction when it comes out. I'm down for that. I think he's definitely going to have a really good take on the topic.
Yeah. And we didn't even get a chance to talk about, we talked a lot of serious stuff this time.
We did.
I really wanted to talk about gaming, which we didn't get a chance to talk about. He's a huge Final Fantasy fan, and I was, at least back in the day. I was a huge Final Fantasy fan. And
we all play RPGs.
We all do RPGs. He's also a toy collector, so...
Yes. Oh, you should definitely get him next time. I know we're going to have him on again someday. When we do, you should definitely get into a talk about his toy collection. He is just, it's neat. It's neat. It's very nerd stuff. It's great.
Yeah, he will geek out for sure. So I know that you've got some stuff that you want to talk about. What do you have going on?
Oh, I got a few things going on for a change. It's like I woke up out of a sleep and a whole bunch of stuff started happening. So, first of all, if you haven't yet, check out Bioluminescence, a lunar punk anthology. I have a story in there. I'm proud to say I am sharing pages with the likes of Neil Gaiman, Starhawk, and a bunch of other amazing science fiction fantasy writers you have heard of. So a real honor to have been in that book. And I've been reading through it. It's amazing. I'm reading through my author copy now. And I couldn't put it down. I was like, I honestly, this is an honest review. If my story weren't in it, I would still have this opinion. I was like, I was reading and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to read a little bit more before I go to bed. 2 hours had passed. It was 3:00 in the morning. I'm like, oh God, So definitely check it out.
And I want to say before you go on, there's a lot of like hardcore solar punk writers in that as well. So if you're big into solar punk, which I know some of our listeners are, you want to check that out.
You do. You really do. It's pretty amazing. I've loved every story I've read so far. And there's poetry too, which is amazing as well.
Nice.
Right. Just fantastic. The other thing I want to talk about, because, hey, why not promote my own stuff too, is my readers probably are well aware that I am a good year behind on the publication schedule that I intended for the Toy Soldier Saga series. I have heard about this more than once. I'm sorry that my life has been chaos, but you'll be happy to know that I am kickstartering both of the next books because they are finished in May. Right. So I'll be, keep your eye out for the Kickstarter link and we'll be Kickstartering them both. Then we will publish them both in September and I will be right back on track for the original publication schedule that I intended. So the next book is called To Know Your Enemy and I haven't entirely settled on it yet, but I will by the time the Kickstarter runs. My current working title has been for a while was Brothers in Arms for the third book. So, yeah. Check it out.
Nice. Yeah, I'm curious how it will go. I mean, I finished the first one about 6 months ago when I had COVID. So, yeah.
Sorry you had COVID. Awesome that you read it. That's cool.
Well, it gave me a chance to read the whole book. I pretty much just sat here and read the whole book straight through. So
nice.
Because I had nothing else to do and nowhere to go.
Valid.
My family was shunning me at the time. I was closed in the room by myself.
Shunning, self-isolating, but shunning. Yeah, valid.
Oh, shunning. That's it. Self-isolating. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it, man. I was deep into that book.
Thanks. Awesome.
Yeah. Are you reading anything good right now?
What am I reading recently? Oh yeah, you know what? I'm reading. I just finished a fantasy erotica, actually, that my daughter recommended called Neon Gods. And as far as, like, if that's not your thing, fine. But I loved it. It was a retelling of Hades and Persephone. The sexy stuff is very sexy. It gets a little kinky. The plot's a bit predictable, but the characters make it really interesting because the portrayal was, it was a good portrayal, right? It's like if Hades and Persephone and all the various Olympians were real people that existed in kind of like a wealthy, haves and haves not dystopia, right? How would they be? And this was the interpretation. So, really cool, actually, really cool. And I am currently reading a book that is not science fiction or fantasy. It's called The Upside of Hunger. I have forgotten the author's name. Just a second. I will Google it. She is local to the Okanagan Valley. We got this book as a prize from our library for, finishing Nano, right? I say we because both Aaron and I got books and I don't remember which one was awarded to whom, but Roxy Harms is her name, right? And it's a very interesting story because it's basically a biography of a man who was a German boy in Hungary during the time of World War II, ended up as a kid who didn't know any better, joining the SS, right? Oh. Horrible stuff that happened to him. Eventually escaping from Russian-occupied territory getting back to his family, and then his family got deported to Germany, even though they'd never been to Germany in their lives, because the treaty agreement was that German ethnic people would be sent back to Germany, right? Mm-hmm. And then from there, he ended up in Canada. And, it's kind of his story about how basically he pulled himself out of really shitty circumstances. And why I find this interesting is because it's not a story we hear a lot, right?
Yeah.
As the Allies, right, and the descendants of the Allies, we usually hear about the horrible shit that Germany did, which was horrible. Mm-hmm. But we don't ever hear about the horrible shit on the other side, and it was just as horrible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In many ways. Not on the mass scale of the Holocaust, right? But on the scale of the massacres and the raping and torture and all of those horrible things that people do to each other in war. There's no good guys in war,
Nope, there's
right?
not.
So
it's just a horrible thing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's one of those things where, breaking your bubble.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, it's, I can't put it down. So good book.
Great.
What about you? What are you reading?
I'm mostly between books right now. I just finished up The Wind-Up Girl not too long ago, and I've been reading a lot of short fiction.
Oh, how is that?
It's excellent, actually. Pretty brutal at some points, but really good.
Uh-huh.
I am just about to start Alan Stroud's newest one, called Resilient.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's the second one in his series. If you recall having him on,
I do.
2 years ago, maybe? Or a year and a half ago or something? But, space opera type of thing. The main character in the first one was disabled and suffering from PTSD, but was like the captain of the ship. And basically it was about them defending their ship from being boarded. And then there was some kind of alien stuff towards the end. I won't get too specific about it. But it was clearly the lead into this book. I'm really looking forward to getting started on it. So you will also be seeing a review for this at some point coming from me.
Awesome.
So that's it for me.
Yeah, that's it for me too. I mean, not that it hasn't been a lot. It's been a very busy day. We've been here now for about 2.5 hours, which is about twice the length of time we normally sit down to do this, because we've had various tech difficulties. It's kind of been a long morning.
Yes, it really has been. So on that note, let's wind this thing up.
Let's do it. Always a pleasure talking with you though, Alan.
Always. Likewise. It's great. Keeping hope alive, one episode at a time. If This Goes On, Don't Panic is edited by Alan Bailey and produced by Ken Schrader. Our theme music is by Father Flamethrower, additional music is by Christopher Snydrowski, and outro music by Sable Aradia. Intro by Dave Robinson. A special thank you to our guest, Ricardo Victoria. Thanks for supporting us, and we'll see you again soon.